Welcome to Transcendent. I'm Raya, and I'm the daughter.
And I'm Joe, and I'm the dad. Hey, Pride Month is doing great. There's a lot of stuff going on out there, huh?
Yeah, there is. And I had a great Pride weekend this last weekend, although we're recording it before this weekend. So I'm looking forward to the coming weekend that I already had by the time you're listening to this. We have been talking about this interview for a long, long time.
And we have your mother, my wife, here to tell her story. And this is a perfect time for us to talk about when you first came out.
Since it's Pride Month, we thought that this was an especially good time to be able to tell the story. And Dad, you've been trying to get Mom here for
almost 2 years
since we started the podcast. Yes. Mom gave a talk at a Christian retreat, a women's retreat. It was 7 years ago, talking about my transition and how our relationship changed. So we asked her to come and share it just as she gave that talk at that Christian women's retreat 7 years ago. Mom is also going to tell the story as how she remembered me prior to my transition, including using my old name. Now, normally we would not do that. But in this case, I asked her, would you share the story the way that you shared it back then? Because I think it's really, really important. And we'll discuss that at the end and how we feel about that now. But I want you to hear it the way she originally gave the talk.
I've never spoken about this before with anyone except close friends. I'm telling you about it because I want you to know that all of us have struggles in our lives. All of us have times when we need to show God's love to others in situations we never expected. Above all, we each have times when we need to turn to close Christian friends and other friends for support and encouragement. I shared this story with my own small group of friends that meets weekly, and they've been among my strongest supporters. I remember that day when I brought it up near the end of one of our weekly gatherings, and I said, I have something I have to tell you. And they said, whoa, that sounds pretty serious. Well, it was. I'll tell it to you the way I told it to them. This happened about 1.5 years ago. We have 2 grown children, a son and a daughter, Ryan and Melanie. That week, our son and his wife had told us that they wanted to speak to us. When we met together at their house one evening, our son spoke. He told us that he had been extremely depressed, that he was seeing a counselor, and that he had even tried to kill himself. We were speechless. We hadn't known. Ryan was 41 years old at the time. We live in a small town where we own our own company, at the time we did, with 25 employees, and Ryan was our company president. Then he told us the even more startling news that took several minutes for us to absorb. In the next few weeks, he planned to transition from male to female. In the psychology books, it's called gender dysphoria. Others use the word transgender. This is not easy to talk about. Take it from me. Not many parents can hear those words without a flood of emotions and reactions. And we were no different. For us, it was completely and totally unexpected, just out of the blue. Initially, these words sent a shock through us like a pistol shot that signals the beginning of a race. And believe me, we felt like our world had been turned upside down. And we certainly did not understand any of it. And we knew our lives would never be the same again. Our daughter-in-law had been aware of the transgender issue and had been dealing with it the best she could for a while before they told us about it. She had finally realized that she could no longer keep it a secret. And she couldn't keep Ryan from being who he wanted to be. In addition, she wanted him to be there, living, alive, for her and for their children. So, a few weeks later, our son transitioned into our daughter. Yes, she has a different name, Raya. Yes, she dresses differently. Yes, it's not easy for her. We live in the same small town where she grew up. So yes, it's difficult. And it's difficult for our daughter-in-law, who now has the main responsibility for the kids. Yes, our grandchildren have questions, and we try to talk openly with them. And yes, I worry about Raya's safety. Yes, I worry about what other people think. Yes, we all have a lot to learn. Now, here's what I want you to hear about this story. I wish for you not to judge, but rather to focus on how friends and God's love are helping to get us through this time. In our family, we all love each other and care for each other, and we want the best for each other. That has never changed. So, how have we handled it? Well, I first counseled with our pastor, who was a big help, though he admitted that this situation was a first for him. No surprise there. But he offered to help us in any way he could, and most of all, he prayed with us and for us. For me, our son was gone, a daughter appeared, and I felt very real sense of pain and loss. I believe I've gone through the stages of grief that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross talks about in her book On Death and Dying. 1, denial. No, this isn't true. This isn't real. This happens to other families, not ours. There must be some mistake. 2, anger. This is when reality set in. This is real. This is not a midlife crisis or a phase. I think I wanted to look for someone or something to blame, even ourselves. For me, this anger wasn't overt, but was internalized. And with the help of friends who listened and family who shared, and with God's help, this stage passed quickly. 3, bargaining. Don't tell anyone. We'll find you help. I think this was a way to protect myself against further pain. And I anticipated things getting harder. What if somebody asks me about Raya? What will I say? How will I react? 4, depression. I don't know what to do. I feel like we've lost our child. I just don't know who my son is anymore. This was difficult. And it was painful. There was nothing more to do. It was not within my control as the parent of an adult. However painful this was, though, I have come to realize that emotions are important, and they have to be felt. We can't and should not hide them. 5, acceptance. I don't understand, but I want to understand. I love Raya. I value her honesty, even if it makes me uncomfortable. And finally, if any of our friends or family have a problem with her, well, they have a problem with me too. And I had to remember that acceptance isn't the same as affirmation or agreement. It doesn't mean we won't feel pain, grief, or loss. It just means that our family now has a new reality. Acceptance makes room for a new look at the future and new possibilities for hope and joy. We trust God to make that happen. It's God's love that gets me through each day. And each day gets better. My love and support for Ryan didn't change when he became Raya. A mother's love doesn't end. During this time, my small group that met weekly was always a safe haven for me, and I owe them so much. They allowed me to be myself, to share my concerns, to show my feelings, and all without any judgment. They offered me a place of serenity and a place of trust, a place where I could be open and yes, vulnerable. I knew with confidence that I could trust them and that whatever I said in this group would stay within the group. They let me cry, and they offered consolation and understanding. And I know that they prayed for me. There's really no way I can adequately convey to you how comforting this group is for me. They radiate God's love and offer kindness and support, and I thank them from the bottom of my heart. Now, of course, for our family, the end result, the good news, is that we still have Raya with us. I can stop grieving because she is alive. She is alive. She lives close to us and to our family. She still maintains a friendship with our daughter-in-law, and she sees her children regularly. Those are all blessings. So here is my message to you. It is God's love and the love of our friends that have gotten us through this and helped our family, including Raya, to adjust to this change. I love my new daughter with my whole heart. And I love my God. He created our children and gave them to us to love and cherish. My group of friends has taught me that love doesn't change with circumstances. Love doesn't change with heartache. Love doesn't change with life's struggles. If anything, it grows stronger. John 15:9 tells us, "As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love." 1 John 4:7-8 says, "Beloved, let us love one another, because love is from God. Everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, for God is love." God loves you, and so do I.
That was really powerful. I remember when you delivered it, I came in to hear it.
Oh, I do remember that.
I hadn't heard it before. You didn't read it to me before that. It meant a lot to me just to hear it. I was at about the same level you were at that point. I guess I would say I was accepting but not affirming. And since we've done this podcast, Raya, I've become not only affirming, but I tell them how proud I am of you.
I remember when I sat down to write this, that it took a long time because I had to think back on how I felt at that time. Things have changed a lot in those years, over those years, as you know, time just changes how we see things and how we look at things. But at that time, everything was still so new and fresh because I had to give this talk. It forced me to sit down and put into words what I was feeling. And I don't think that I had ever done that before. It would be difficult to say a lot of those things to you, or to you, Dad, daughter, either one of you. It just would have been hard to think about how I felt and say those things. So it did take some time for me to actually write it down and think about how I felt.
Yeah. It's not something that is really, hey, let's talk about our hardest, most emotional thoughts here and go through. But I think there's a lot of people that are going through this. I have a friend that she's a trans woman, but she's very, very early in her transition. She's been messaging me for years and just been taking a long time. And she said, my mom is really worried about me, that when I transition, will I be safe? And how is this going to work? And how are people going to treat me? And I can hear that coming through with you.
Definitely. Those were real concerns, really things that I had to think about. That really forefronted my mind, I'm sure.
How do you think you might tell the story differently now? What strikes you as, oh, wow, I forgot that I felt that way?
Oh, I'm not sure. I think all those stages of grief, that's come and gone. I would definitely say that that's not something I even think about anymore. Maybe it's the same thing as when a person actually dies, and then over time, it gets better and better, and that certainly has happened here. Those when I read those now about those five stages of grief, I don't really feel any of those today. I think I've completely gone well beyond that stage. Just total acceptance, affirmation, and it's probably my way of growing, showing growth. I've changed.
Sure. One of the things I appreciate about when Dad tells the story, and I think when you would tell the story, if you were to rewrite it now, is telling it with me, with my pronouns now, and with my name now. And it was definitely jarring, even though we talked about it. It was jarring for me to hear my old name and to hear my old pronouns. But that was very much how you needed to tell the story when you were telling it for yourself.
And when I was telling it to someone else to explain it to someone what had happened and how it occurred. Yes.
Yeah. And I think that doesn't seem like how I would expect that you would tell the story now. You probably wouldn't need to any longer.
Would not. No.
Yeah. I remember too, when I first transitioned, I said at one point, would you like to go clothes shopping together? And you said,
the first time when you mentioned that, I was like, I don't think so. Nope, not ready for that one.
not quite yet.
Not ready for that. But, it wasn't long after that, maybe, I don't know, 6 months, when we did shop together. And so time makes a difference.
Yeah,
we all
sure
adjust.
And now I just got in the mail today at 30% off at Kohl's. So if you do want to
go, let's do it together.
Well, I think here what I've just heard and being reminded of this again in your delivery is something that is very powerful. And as you're listening to this out here, I'm sure you may be thinking of someone that should hear this. Maybe you've got a mother, or maybe you've got a daughter or a son that has come out to you and you don't know exactly what to expect. I think that this is probably one of the most powerful stories I've heard.
Really? Oh.
Yes, that is great. If you want a tool to use to share with someone else, say, hey, listen to Raya's mother.
It's hard to get the real reactions, especially from somebody that's supportive, but still struggling with things. We hear a lot of stories about parents that say, I'm not on board with this, and work really hard to try to change their child. We hear those stories. And then we hear the good stories of parents that have gone through all of that. And we hear a lot, from Dad about how excited he is and how he can't wait to tell people. But we don't often hear that story of that in-between state. It was a really good snapshot of what do those emotions really look like? How does it feel? And how do you get through it? The fact that you're here now 7 years later and can give that story about, I've moved on, I don't feel like this anymore, I think gives hope in a way that is really hard to see from any other perspective.
When you told us, I just felt like you are an adult and you are an intelligent person. And when you made this decision, I know that you didn't come by it lightly, that it must have taken a long, long time to come to this decision. And once you were able to actually get to the point where you could share it with us, you really, really had thought this through. And so I think I felt I just wanted to support you in that and do what I could do, if there was anything I could do, to help you to get through it.
Yeah. And that meant so much to me. I don't know if I could have gotten through it without both of your support.
Were you concerned before you did that you didn't know how we were going to react, whether we would be a supporter or?
I was concerned, but first of all, it was kind of thrust upon me. I didn't know when it was time to tell you. I didn't know that I was going to be telling you because it kind of just happened. But when it did happen, I would have expected that I would be worried about it. But what I actually found by the time I got to it was that I was so relieved because I felt like it was a burden that I was carrying.
Mm-hmm.
And when I finally got to tell you, it was like, I don't have to hide anymore. And it was so much more freeing than I ever expected that it was going to be. I also forget, too, how much you talk about my attempt to take my life. I didn't try that hard. And I think that's important. I wasn't really wanting to, but in that moment, I felt like all of my options were bad and I didn't care if I succeeded. And it's hard to realize in that moment how much that affects other people. And I remember when my ex-wife came out and found me and then insisted on calling you guys right away, I was really embarrassed. I couldn't believe that I let myself get to this point. But it was a wake up for myself of how important it was that I couldn't keep it going. And that happened, I think, after I talked to you. So we had the conversation. I said, this is what I'm doing, but I wasn't ready to transition yet. It was just, look, I don't know where this is going. This is an issue. And I really felt like for a long time, it was months of struggle of trying to figure out, can I really do this? Because I know it's going to mean the end of my marriage. I'm not going to be able to live with my kids anymore. What's this going to mean for my ministry? All of those things. And I had a breaking point that I wish it wouldn't have taken that. For me, for you guys, I was really embarrassed that I had to go through it. And yet, it ended up being the moment that we all realized this is real.
But in the beginning, we didn't want to tell anybody either.
But I do remember once when we sat down with friends of ours, very close friends, and said, we have something to tell you. And they're like, kind of the same thing that as I said in this story, but these were our closest friends. And they were like, well, what? What is it? And when we told them, I think the response was almost a blank look, like, what are you talking about? I have no idea what this is all about. And we didn't know much about it either. But I also want to say that when you told us, I had a lot of concern for you, thinking about, well, first, what all you're going to have to go through to transition. And I also thought about your family and how that would affect your family, the kids, and your wife at the time. And that meant a lot to me, of course, because I love them all dearly too. And so it's not just how something like this happens and affects us because of who you are, but it also affects how we relate to, in this case, our grandchildren and our daughter-in-law. Those are so important to keep that all together.
And I think we have.
Yes, I think we have.
Really, really well. Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on and joining us and sharing this difficult, emotional.
And we'd like to encourage you out there to share this with other people. We would love to have you be one of our supporters. It's easy to do. You can see the support button. You can go to transgender.com and get it. You can see it at the bottom of the show you're listening to right now. You could do it for $3 a month, $5, $7, or $10 a month. And you can cancel anytime.
We'd love to get your feedback as well. You can send us an email, transdescendant@gmail.com. You know, what impacted you? What did you like? Maybe you have some thoughts on something you'd like to see coming up. Let us know. We're glad that we can be your voice of positivity here.
And we'll see you Monday.